Okay, sir, off you go. Bye-bye. Hi, everybody. It's Saturday, the 2nd of May, 2020. Thank you for joining in with us for these daily broadcasts. We trust that you're being blessed in these days. In spite of all of the uncertainty, we know who holds the future. I want to ask you a question today. It's quite simply this. What if you give Jesus Christ everything? What if you give to the Lord all that you have? In John chapter 6 and verse number 9, one of the disciples came to the Lord in the midst of maybe a crisis of faith for the disciples, because there was a great multitude gathered that day, 5,000 men, and also amongst that women and children. We're not sure just how many there were. We often talk about the feeding of the 5,000, but the reality is there were a lot more than 5,000. There were 5,000 men, there were women, there were children. And they were hungry. Just like this world in which we live in, people are starving spiritually on the top, as it were, of every street. But one of the disciples came even to the Saviour, Andrew, and said to the Lord, Lord, there is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. And then almost mockingly he says, but Lord, what are they among so many? And the lovely truth is that little is much when God is in it. That little boy was willing to give all that he had. What if I give all that I have? Jesus says I can feed a multitude. What about the lady with the alabaster box? And she came with that alabaster box of ointment, and she thinks within her heart, what if I give to him all that I have? And the Lord says, she hath wrought a good work in me. She hath done what she could. What about the old lady with her 2 mites? Very, very little, but it was all that she had. And she said to herself, what if I give all that I have? Many, many people in the Bible and in history asked that great question. What about the Saviour himself as he saw a world that was lost? Says to the Father, what if I give all that I have and lay down my life and go to a cross? It results in the salvation of multitudes. You know, years ago there was an old Scottish preacher. He wasn't very successful in the eyes of the world or even in the eyes of the church, but yet he faithfully gave to the Saviour all that he had. One year at the end of his ministry, the office bearers in the church were surveying the year that had gone by, looking at the church accounts, looking at the record of attendance, communicants received in, souls converted, and it didn't make for very encouraging reading. And they went to the minister and they says, listen, how many people have been saved in this last year? And he kind of hung his head a little bit embarrassed. He says, as far as I know, just one. Just one young lad, his name's Robert. And that little boy was Robert Moffatt, who went on to be one of the great pioneer missionaries in Africa. He gave the Saviour everything that he had. Whenever Robert Moffatt was an old man, he was addressing a large crowd of people in Scotland. And he was encouraging people to yield their lives to the Saviour, give all that you have to the Lord. And sitting at the back of that meeting, there was another young Scotchman, David Livingstone. And that day he said, I will give the Lord everything that I have. And so off David Livingstone went a number of years later as an explorer, as a pioneer missionary to Africa. He went out by and large as an unknown, but by the end of his life he was world famous for his missionary work, for his endeavours to press into the heart of Africa, to construct maps and different things. And of course, whenever he was an aged man, he began to get a little bit more popular. Whenever he was dead, people began to eulogise him. And his body was buried in Westminster Abbey. And there's a great brass plate on the floor. Here lies the body of David Livingstone. Whenever he went out at the start, he was unknown. But whenever his body came back, the world held him in such regard. But there's an old story, I assume it's true, that before they brought David Livingstone's body back from Africa, some of the local tribesmen went and they took his body and they cut out his heart and they buried his heart at the bottom of a tree in their native nation of Africa. And they put up a little sign, David Livingstone. His body lies buried somewhere in England, but his heart is still very much in Africa. There was a man who gave his heart to the Saviour, his heart, his life to the Lord. He gave all that he had. What about you? What if you give all that you are, and all that you have, and all that you ever hope to be? D.L. Moody said, give your life to God, He can do much more with it than you ever could. And by, whenever we stand someday at the judgment seat of Christ, if we have given Him everything, we will have no regrets. May God bless you. Think about those words. Lad, 2 small fishes and 5 little loaves, and he gave it all to the Lord. Give your life to God, even today.